Good evening. I'd like to welcome you to the Greater Newburyport Green Expo. We have our first speaker here, Mark Richey with Mark Richey Woodworking. His talk is going to be titled Creating and Running a Net Zero Business. Mark Richey began his career as an apprentice to a harpsichord maker. In 1981, he founded Mark Richey Woodworking, and today the company occupies a 130,000 square foot facility here in Newburyport and employs a direct workforce of about 100 highly skilled and dedicated craftsmen. Mark's lifelong passion for mountain climbing and exploring wild places has guided his bold initiatives in renewable energy and conservation in the workplace. Through his investment in wind, solar, and biomass, Mark Richey Woodworking achieves nearly 100% on-site renewable energy production and is considered one of the greenest manufacturing companies in the country. Let's have a warm welcome for Mark Richey.
Thanks, Bill, and thank you all for being here. I really appreciate that at least somebody showed up. So I changed the name of the presentation to Adventures of Going Green because, well, first of all, I really like adventures. I've been mountain climbing and exploring wild places for over 40 years, and there's something very inherently similar of climbing mountains and taking the bold step of becoming a very green company. And it's the uncertainty and the risks that for some may be challenges and headaches, but for us at our company, these were things that we saw as part of the reason we wanted to go green. We wanted to be pioneers. We were attracted to the adventure of learning how to be a greener company. And the other parallel that I'd just like to add is that it's through my experiences in the outdoors, in climbing and being in wild places, that have really been that ongoing motivation to try and become a better steward of the environment. And I'm going to come back to that point, but I think it's a really key point about this whole journey of becoming green in our homes, in our businesses. It's really, you know, we can look at it from a business standpoint and we can look at it from a practical standpoint, but the real fundamental reason that we do it, and I think we should do it, is because we want to do a better job of taking care of our planet Earth. So, as Bill said, I started off as an apprentice to a harpsichord maker and learned woodworking from a very fine, highly detailed perspective. Not long after that, I started my own company in South Boston, where we built cabinets and furniture and interiors, and began to attract a very diverse and highly skilled group of people to work with us. From the beginning, it was a family business, and there's my wife, Teresa, and we were not just partners in life, but partners in business and in everything we did. And it's been a key part of our success, working together, because we've taken on so many unusual projects over the years. I think had we not been in it together, it would have been really difficult. Certainly, I couldn't have done it by myself. And even our daughter, that's our, I can remember bringing her to the first of our shops as a child and having her there in the crib. So she's been a part of this whole process and this whole business and everything we do, and to this very day. She's a midwife, by the way, now at Mass General. So one of our second shop was in Essex. We were there for almost 14 years, and it was a wonderful building and a wonderful community, but it was a drafty, inefficient building with old systems, and eventually we outgrew it. And when we outgrew it, we began to look around for a new place to build our growing company where we could sort of start from scratch. And we did, I think, the first of our major green initiatives, and that was to select an old building that we could renovate and reuse as much as possible. So we found this building here, the old Owens, Illinois building in Newburyport. And fortunately, we had wonderful cooperation from the then mayor of Newburyport, Mayor Clancy, and were really welcomed here and we transformed this derelict 130,000 square foot building into a state-of-the-art manufacturing facility. And this is we often talk about green initiatives and we forget some of the simplest things that are really among the most important. A tight building envelope, modern windows, modern electrical, all those things, and also reusing things. So one of the early ideas we had in our green initiatives, and let me just add, when we moved to this building, from the very beginning, I said we're going to have a goal of becoming 100% renewably powered. And we knew it was a lofty goal, but that was from the first day, and this is 14 years ago now, or 15 years ago that we bought this building. That was our goal, so it was a long process. So one of the first things we did was to renovate this huge building, insulating, tightening the building, replacing the roof, doing the easy but smart things that we all can do in our homes and businesses. And that's kind of how it looked when we moved in. And here we had this big, brand new, efficient working area, and it really almost overnight impacted our business in all ways positive. We were more efficient, we were more profitable, it was a better working environment for our people, the lighting was better, and so on and so forth. And to give you an idea of the kind of work we do, we are an architectural woodworking company, which is a fancy word for custom woodworking, but everything we make in our shop is one of a kind for some unusually designed project. So we have embraced technology across all our departments, and we're one of the first companies to actually utilize 3D modeling in our computer drafting program. A few examples of the kind of work we do: very high-end interiors, often complex geometry and furniture, to huge interiors of performing arts centers like this Kaufman Performing Arts Center in Kansas City. So as we looked at our green initiatives, the first thing we tackled was the systems in our company. And one of the things all woodworking companies have is a big dust collection. All the machines extract the dust from the processes as they're planing or milling or sanding. And all that dust ends up being stored in big silos or containers. But the way it's done is often done with huge motors that are running full steam all the time. And by simply adding a computerized EcoGate system, we were able to reduce the electrical demands by 50%. And because this system, it's called the EcoGate system, was so efficient, we qualified for the gold star of energy efficiency, which meant that our utility had to give us pay nearly 90% of the total investment. So this was about $120,000 add-on to our dust collection system, and we got a check written from the utility for about $90,000, which made the payback about 1 year. But these kinds of really practical energy efficient approaches that I think sometimes are overlooked. The fact of the matter is no one told us about this. We had to go out and find it, and there's a lot of this type of technology available. So I talked about reusing as well. So when we moved in, this was Owens, Illinois, the original owners of the building were a blow mold plastics manufacturer. And these great big silos you see here in the picture were used to store the plastic resin for their product. Well, the first thing I remember somebody saying is, "Oh, you're going to tear down those horribly ugly silos, aren't you?" And I said, "Absolutely not. We're going to use those to store all our wood waste all summer long so we can burn it in a super efficient biomass furnace and heat our whole building." Of course, I had no idea how we were going to actually do that, but because Teresa and I had toured a whole bunch of woodworking shops in Europe a few summers before that, and seen every wood shop there, even half the size of our wood shop, was using this biomass technology. Why? Because they're paying 3 or 4 times the amount that we pay for fossil fuels like gas and oil. So there was no way they were going to throw away all this really valuable biomass fuel. So they had the technology. They were the experts in the technology because they've been using it for a practical reason for so many years. So the first thing we did was investigate this kind of technology. And there's our biomass furnace. It burns at about 1600 degrees, so very, very hot. Goes through a very extensive filtration system. So by the time the flue gases are going out the chimney, it's really just water vapor and carbon. Cleaner than, say, the oil furnace or gas furnace in our homes. And we were the first company to install this type of biomass technology in the woodworking industry in this country. So we're very proud of that. And just so we know, biomass is what we call net zero. So it's still adding carbon to the environment, but it's adding it on the same timeline that it's taking it out. So you grow a tree, you cut it down and burn it, or it decays in the forest, it releases the same carbon that's absorbed in its lifetime. Unlike when we unlock sequestered fossil fuels like gas and oil, which have been stored in the earth for millions of years. So it's not as good as wind and solar and some other forms, but it's pretty good. So it's something that actually I think we should be doing more of. Just a snapshot of the computer program and showing the temperatures. And it's basically just a big fancy wood furnace that's burning very high temperatures with a complex filtration system, heating up a hot water loop. And one of the advantages we also found to the biomass furnace is that although it's helping the environment, it was also really improving the work environment of our employees, because we were able to, number one, heat the entire envelope of the building 24/7, so the workers wouldn't be coming into a cold building in the morning like often people do in manufacturing facilities. And it was not as dry of a heat, and so there's just a healthier environment, fewer colds, etc. So here we are installing the big augers and the equipment used to convey the wood waste. So one of the real challenges of biomass, it's not the burning of it, that's the easy part. It's storing and conveying the waste, because it's so much bulkier than say gas and oil, which runs through relatively small lines. So that's something to be concerned, or at least to understand, and one of the challenges. So after our first real major green initiative of installing this biomass furnace, we looked around, and one of the things we said is, you know, we should have gotten some government support, some subsidy for this project. And there was none at the time. We looked into it. Unless we were co-generating electricity, there were no tax exemptions or grants or of any kind. So we paid 100% for that. But it led us to our next initiative, which we realized that if we were to install an energy or electrical generating facility, there was quite a bit of government support. So that led us to the wind turbine. This was 2008. And we looked at the time at both solar and wind. And at the time, wind was a better investment. We could, it was, believe it or not, less dollars to build this wind turbine than to cover the roof with solar panels that would generate, at the time, roughly the same amount of electricity. So we launched into a very major project for us, which was the first engineering, siting, permitting, and eventually the construction of a 600 kilowatt, 300-foot tall wind turbine, which I'm sure many of you have seen here in town. So the first, in many ways, greatest hurdle of installing or building a wind turbine of this size in a community was getting the permitting. Newburyport had no permitting mechanism, no way to actually permit a wind turbine. We had to create one. So we created an ordinance, and Newburyport did a fantastic job of this, and I think there was some 14 public hearings, because wind, although it is a fantastic resource, not everybody wants to see a wind turbine in their neighborhood, and we understand that. So siting of wind turbines is really one of the greatest challenges in finding the right place to put wind turbines. The next challenge we faced was, where do we get a wind turbine? of one that's going to be the right size and the right type for us. And we were sort of in that in-between size. We were maxed out on the total height of the turbine, and there weren't a lot of manufacturers making turbines this size. They were a lot smaller or a lot bigger. So ultimately we bought the technology from Belgium, and it was being assembled in India. So here we are visiting the plant in India, Elecon plant, this huge, massive gear-making facility that was also building wind turbines. We actually inspected several turbines that were operating there of the type we were going to build, then purchased the turbine, and then came back and began the process of installation. Now the first part of installing a wind turbine is the foundation. And these are massively strong foundations because there's so much force on a wind turbine. Totally different than typical foundations for buildings or even bridges. These foundations have to resist a huge amount of moment because the turbine literally wants to get pushed over as it's capturing all this wind. We use a very unique design, actually, which I was fascinated with because it was designed by these two guys out in California named Patrick and Henderson, and they were designing thousands of wind turbine foundations for a fraction of the cost that we thought the local engineers quoted for us. Normally, or I should say the easy way to build a foundation for a wind turbine is to do a huge spread footing, like a giant paperweight. But the Patrick and Henderson team has this very unique pier called cap and pier footing, where they drill down until they reach bedrock, in this case 90 feet, and they anchor a disc of highly reinforced concrete and hold that in tension down to the rock that it's embedded into. So you can just see the cap here with a densely spaced rebar, and then that's filled in with concrete, and you can see those big bolts there. Those go down 90 feet and are anchoring this whole cap to the bedrock below. And then arrived the tower section. So it's a 200-foot tower, a little over 200 feet. Came in 3 sections, came all the way from North Dakota. And they had to route this carefully all the way through the United States because there were many places where the roads were not big enough or the bridges were too tight to maneuver these sections. But they eventually arrived. And how are we doing on time? Okay. And here you can see the nacelle. So this is the guts of the wind turbine. And I like this picture because it shows the complexity. You see the big generator on the right in green and the gearbox and all the hydraulics. They are very complicated things, far more complicated than, say, solar panels. And it's one of the downsides, actually, to wind turbines, because anything that's complicated like that is apt to have problems and requires a lot of maintenance. So erecting a wind turbine, it's not like you build it and then forget about it. They have constant maintenance, constant upkeep. A lot of parts need to be maintained. There are the 3 big tower sections getting ready for erection. And here we are raising the first section of the tower over the foundation with the connection bolts in place. And I was quite relieved when the bolt layout actually matched the holes in the flange, because the 2 of them had never seen each other. It was just all done from drawings, of course. And here we are putting on the final tower, and you can just see a couple of guys' heads poking out of the second section of tower, and they were there as the top section of tower hovered over there by hand, just rotating until they got the bolts to drop in place. And my dad, who was 90 at the time, really excited about this project, as he called it, the wind machine. He was very proud of what we were doing and took a great deal of interest in the whole technology behind it. He wanted to go to the top, but we weren't going to let him do that at 90. And finally, we had to wait for a totally calm day to raise the rotor and hub assembly, the blades, because any wind would have blown those around and the cranes wouldn't be able to handle them. There we are raising it up, and I remember we got it right up to the very top, but it kept slipping in the slings, and we needed to get it at a slight incline to match the bolt pattern, and they were struggling with it, and then a little gust of wind came through and just picked it up and did it for us. And there we are on top. That's me on top of the turbine the day that it was erected. We had a great crowd around. It was very exciting. It was the first large commercial turbine to be erected on the North Shore of Boston. So we were very excited about that. And since then, there's about 5 turbines you can see from this turbine. And we've been a part of helping each one of those projects as consultants and just giving our advice and helping out. And it's great to see. I hope we continue to see more of it. On the top of the turbine, you'll see these 3 little items. That one is the FAA light to warn airplanes, and the other 2 are simply an anemometer and a weather vane. And this is just the little weather station that sends all the signals down to the master computer that controls all the functions of the turbine. Because our turbine, like all large commercial turbines, is what's called an active yaw and active pitch. So it's moving around to always face into the wind, and it's pitching its blades to control the speed of its revolution. And as I said, wind turbines have a great deal of maintenance, and it's one of the things that people investing in them have to understand. We're maintaining every 2 or 3 months, tightening the thousands of bolts that are within the turbine, constantly monitoring its various components, replacing parts, sometimes big parts, and even cleaning the turbine. And we can either get a crane to come in to clean the blades, which is pretty expensive, about $10,000 to bring a big crane in, or I can get my mountain climbing equipment, rappel down from the top, and there I am washing away at the blades. So this is the cheap way to do it. And I have fun too. So very quickly, because we're running out of time, but with the significant improvement in manufacturing of solar panels, our second project after the wind turbine was to install 1,600 solar panels, a 500 kilowatt solar array on the rooftop. And this was really a no-brainer. By the time we chose to do this, the cost of solar has come down so much. There you can see the full array. And this brought us up to 100% generation of the electricity used within our facility. And just quickly, this little spreadsheet showing the various return on investments is quite interesting. If you look at the bottom row, you can see, so, 8 years for the biomass furnace, about 9 years for the wind turbine, a little over a year for that EcoGate system. So, again, those are the kinds of things that often really make sense. It's how can we use less power? That's a great place to start. We just replaced all the lighting in our entire building. Lighting that when we moved in 2007 or 6 was state-of-the-art, the highest efficiency fluorescent lighting. We just replaced it all with LED, and it's a no-brainer because, and reused, by the way, all the fixtures so that there's minimal amount of waste there. But it's a no-brainer because that technology has come so far in just that short amount of time. And lastly, I know we got to go here, but I did get a late start. The unexpected benefit from this whole journey of green initiatives and going green as a company was the educational benefit that we've been able to offer to our employees, to our friends and families, but also to the community. We have given tours to over 1,000 young people and adults of our wind turbine and our green technology, all at no cost. But really, I think maybe it's the greatest impact we've had with these green initiatives. Sure, we've reduced our carbon footprint significantly, effectively taking thousands of cars off the road, but it's how we inspire that next generation of young people to really go above and beyond what we're doing. And so things like wind turbines and solar panels are really just second nature. Daughter at the top. And Finally, I'd just like to come back to my passion for the wild places in the mountains. It's really, I think, the one thing throughout my lifetime that has motivated me, and I think it's so important that we teach young people and old people alike how important these wild places, our environment is, because if you don't love it, if you don't really care about it, you're not going to want to really protect it. So I think that's really the key has been for me and our family is to, we do this for a lot of reasons, but fundamentally it's because we care about our planet and we care about the environment. Thank you all. Of course, yeah. If anybody has questions, I'll be over at our booth later on and you can ask me then. Thank you.